I'm I've got a PhD in cannabinoid and psychopharmacology. It's essentially the study of cannabis compounds and their effects on us. A bit of conflicts of interest. So me and my team have been involved in clinical trials where we've studied CBD for schizophrenia with the drug company GW Pharmaceuticals, but I was only ever paid by King's College in that. Sadly, I won't have time to talk about that research in this topic. So a bit about the background. Now I'd like to bring it to one of maybe the oldest cannabis researchers. This is a psychiatrist from France, Joseph Moreau. He founded a club he called the Hash Club, where he had famous writers, and they all sat together, consumed vast quantities of hash to explore the inner workings of the mind. And in mid-1800s, he wrote a book called Hash and Mental Illness, Psychological Studies. And this quote, I think, is quite interesting because it relates a lot to what I do personally in my research. So he says, hashish gives to whoever submits to its influences the power to study in himself the mental disorders that characterize insanity, or at least the intellectual modifications that are the beginnings of all forms of mental illness. Now, Moreau thought that drugs like cannabis could both be the cause of mental illness, but also potentially the treatment for it. Now, the intellectual modification is particularly interesting to me because we do experiments with healthy volunteers, and we see how the way that they perceive and the way that they think slightly becomes modified when they're under the influence. Right, so we've got a plant. The plant produces at least 144 different cannabinoids that we know of, probably a bit more, lots of other compounds as well. But the main two ones are THC and CBD. THC is the intoxicating compound of the plant. CBD is non-intoxicating, but we think it's quite relevant pharmacologically, maybe protects against some of the negative sides of THC. Now, cannabis makes these compounds in the trichomes that you see on the right side. So they're mainly around the flowering tops of the female cannabis plants. So within that is the chemical factory of cannabis. And what you see on the right side is that both THC and CBD are made within the plant from a precursor cannabinoid called CBG. Now, the genes of the plant will determine how much of CBG turns into THC or CBD. That means there's a limit to how much of both compounds you can make. So if you want the strongest possible plant, it's a THC dominant one, means that not a lot of CBG is left to make CBD. And conversely, if you want a CBD plant, there's not a lot of space for THC, sorry. So if you want more of one, you'll have to sacrifice the other. And that's kind of what you're seeing with growers of cannabis. So these are some rough varieties that we classify. So herbal cannabis grows outdoors. And the main issue here is that the female plants get hit by pollen and start producing seeds. And that seed production is very costly for the plant, meaning it will produce less trichomes and becomes a weaker product. Hash is collected trichomes from the plant together with plant material. So usually it's quite a potent product, but it completely depends on the type of cannabis that you've used when you made the hash. And the last one is what we call high potency. There's many names. One common one in the UK is skunk, but sinsemilla is a Spanish word that means without seed. So what you do with sinsemilla is that you restrict access to the males for the females. So instead of producing seeds, it keeps producing these trichomes, resulting in a far stronger product. Now, what we've seen in the UK, particularly in London, across the last decade, is a shift towards making most of the cannabis being the high potency varieties. So it's extremely difficult to find some of these weaker varieties in London at the moment. Now, if you look at the chemical composition, this is a bit old now, but resin or hash used to be a 1-to-1 ratio of THC-CBD, relatively low levels of THC. while Sinsemilla, as you can see, averages close to 14% THC with hardly any CBD. Herbal, no CBD, quite low levels of THC. Now, why this is important, I'm not going to go into the whole cannabis and schizophrenia debate, because that's a whole different talk altogether, but that there is an association between cannabis use and the risk of psychosis. But we'll avoid the debate about causality and definition of risk. But anyway, this is a study from King's. They asked about 400 patients with psychosis and 400 healthy volunteers what type of cannabis they used and how often they used it. And looking at the risk of having psychosis, they found that hash users, remember the weak 1-to-1 ratio one, even everyday use wasn't related to an increased risk. While the stronger variety, the Sinsemilla, if you used it every day, that's a 5-fold increased risk. So there seems to be an association there, although we might not explain how that association is there. Another thing is that what we've seen in the UK over the past 20 years is actually a reduction in cannabis use among adults. But what we've also seen is a subsequent increase in the number of people needing treatment for cannabis use problems. And that might be linked to the strength of cannabis, because we know that most of the cannabis available in the UK now is the stronger variety. And a colleague of mine got his hands on some very nice Dutch data. So in Holland, they have an institute called the Trimbos Institute that goes out and analyzes the strength of cannabis in coffee shops. Now, what he found is that in the year 2000, THC levels in the coffee shops were about 8%, and it shot up to over 20% in about 4 years. And with a time lag of about 5 years, they saw an equal increase in number of people seeking help for cannabis use problems. And then the market kind of pushed back and said, this is a bit too strong. So the strength dropped down to an average about 15%. And you can see that the number of presentation to drug use services also dropped. So this is preliminary evidence still, so we don't know how strong this is, but there seems to be a link between the strength of cannabis and the problems associated with it. Right, so on to what me and my team have been doing. So my colleague Paul Morrison, he did the first THC experiment that got published in 2009. And what he did, he got 22 healthy males to come for 2 separate visits. And they get intravenous injections of either pure THC, 2.5 milligrams. To kind of quantify that, that's probably somewhere around above 1 joint, maybe 1.5 joints. So it's quite a lot of THC that people get, or placebo. And he saw what the drug did to these healthy volunteers. Now, what you see on the left here is called the PANS scale, the Positive and Negative Syndrome Scale. It's a scale that we use to measure symptoms of psychosis in patients with schizophrenia. It's used in schizophrenia research. But in healthy people, after a big dose of THC, you kind of see the same similar symptoms, although I need to stress that this is far from actually being a psychotic episode. These are just these kind of intellectual modifications, the same kind of phenomena, but far less intense. And as you can see, after 2 hours, those symptoms are not there anymore. But for a short period of time, you can see these kind of psychotic phenomena. And here are some quotes from some of the participants to see what kind of symptoms that they kind of experienced, even for a very short moment of time. People reading your mind, feeling things are threatening and sinister. Someone's parietal lobe is talking, obviously a neuroscientist. No judgment. But then Paul was very interested in the combination of the two, and in this instance, there was BBC researchers doing a documentary, and Paul agreed for her to be a participant. Paul agreed actually to it being filmed if she would be a participant. So this is a short clip of her experience.
The Institute of Psychiatry, I've agreed to take part in a unique medical trial designed to find out. It's part of their ongoing research into the link between stronger cannabis and psychosis. The scientists are interested in the effects of the ratio between the two main components of cannabis, THC and cannabinoid. So on one day, I'm being injected with pure THC, something like ultra-high potency skunk. On the other day, I get a mixture of THC and cannabinoid, more like the natural makeup of the cannabis plant. When I get the injections, I don't know what I'm getting. It turns out that this one is a mixture of THC and cannabinoid. After 10 minutes, it hits me. With the THC and cannabinoid, no matter how hard I try to take the experiment seriously, it all seems hilarious.
What does it feel like? It looks very enjoyable.
Oh my God, it's fun! It was amazing. Amazing. With the pure THC, it's a different story. It's horrible. It's like being at a funeral. Worse. It's sort of like, it's just so depressing.
So she's actually received the exact same amount of THC on both visits. The only difference here is that on one visit she got 5 milligrams of CBD before or 1.25 milligram of THC. Now, although this is just a very, very small pilot study of 6 people, so you shouldn't be convinced by it, but we see the same kind of increase in psychotic-like symptoms in these people, but when you co-administer CBD, the symptoms are a bit reduced. So obviously we needed to ramp things up and make it a bit bigger, so we did. In this study, we had 48 healthy volunteers come in and do experiments, but this time you got randomized, either receiving a placebo capsule or a large oral dose of CBD, 600 milligrams, as a pre-treatment before you had 1.5 milligrams of THC. Now, it ended up being 26 people received the placebo tablet and then THC, and 22 got the CBD plus THC combination. Now, we perform memory tests on people, so we asked them to learn a list of 12 words. 20 minutes after, we ask you to remember as many of the words as you can. And what we saw here after the THC on the right is that there was an 11% drop in people's performance. So on average, people forget one extra word on THC. But if you had the CBD as well, that effect was blocked. So it seems that the addition of 600 milligrams of CBD protects some of the memory functioning under the influence of cannabis. Secondly, we used a scale to measure paranoid thoughts. This is a state social paranoia scale. And after THC, you see that people get on average one paranoid thought that they didn't have before. But in the black bars, which is a CBD group, so they had pre-treatment with CBD, there wasn't an increase in paranoia. So it seems like CBD blocks the paranoia effects of THC. And then lastly, again, this is the psychotic-like symptoms. So if you had a 3 or more increase on that psychosis scale, then that's a positive psychotic reaction, we call it. And that happened to 11 out of 26 who received only THC, only 3 out of 22 in the CBD group. So you're about 4.5 times less likely to have these kind of psychotic-like features if you have it with CBD. So a bit of protective effect from CBD, it seems. So we've ramped it up even more and added some more elements to it. Sadly, this study, I don't have all the results yet, so I'll just share what the study is about. But here we wanted to see what ratio of THC to CBD would be most protective, I guess. So we had standardized cannabis preparations from a Dutch cannabis company who delivered it using a vaporizer. And these are the ratios here. So on every day, so healthy volunteers come for 4 experiments each, and they get the same amount of THC. On one occasion, there's no CBD, and then there's a 1-to-1, 2-to-1, and 3-to-1 ratio. And it's all blinded, so we don't know and they don't know what they get, and it's randomized so you don't know which ratio you get on what day. So this is what an experiment looks like here. So you come in at baseline, we get a baseline blood sample, and then we do a VAS, visual analog scale. So these are mood states of feeling high, feeling anxious, paranoid, sleepy, and so on. So we did that several times during the day. And then here we have the inhalation. So received 2 balloons of the cannabis vapor, and then there's 3 blood samples. And then here, immediately after you have the drug, you did another visual analog scale to say how high you felt. We did about cognitive tests for about half an hour after we do another visual analog scale. And then we have a bit of a reward for our participants. So we also wanted to look at the pleasurable effects of the drug, meaning people enjoy taking cannabis alongside listening to music and eating foods. So we had people choose a song and listen to it on every experiment and say whether or not the song is nicer or not as nice during the intoxication. Same thing for a piece of chocolate. So they had a piece of chocolate and said whether or not it tasted nicer or not as nice during the intoxication. Then we had a so-called hospital walk, or a social interaction task. We gave participants £2 worth of money. They had to walk through the corridors of the hospital to the hospital shop, walk around, purchase items, interact with the person behind the till, and walk back, just to see how people feel in a social environment, which during cannabis can be a bit paranoid. And then you come back, you recover, and once you're fully sober, we do these psychological questionnaires again, where we ask if there's been any paranoia or any strange experiences. And then when they're sober, they can go home. Now, this study, we have the luck of being part of the BBC documentary as well, and they had a presenter who became a participant in the experiments. I have the full documentary on memory sticks, you can get it after the talk, but I'm going to show a few clips of his experiences. Just enjoy it.
Oh my god. What am I feeling?
Yeah? Yeah. It is strong? Is it mild? What would you call it?
It's just making me laugh. I'm beginning to think this is a trick on my patients. Like, he's just going to carry on going till I stop or what? How long is this test? Honestly, how long is this? I'm going to stop going, this is ridiculous.
A few more minutes.
A few more minutes? I'm stopping. You're teasing me.
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I literally thought this was some sort of, let's see how long the idiot goes.
No.
You sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
Why is it not stopping?
So that was his first experience, and actually, he received THC only on this day. And you can see that there is a bit of suspiciousness. The test feels like it's taking long. So he's imagining actually that the test is not the test is actually how long does he go on until he stops. But he's done this once before sober. So he's already experienced the same test. So clear some evidence of paranoia here. And this is his second visit.
This time it's a lot more mellow. So I'm just very relaxed and happy to just lie here without any care for the world. It's really quite pleasant. Last time there was lots of paranoia last time, and this time there isn't. I'm just enjoying it. So it's really odd to not have that paranoia. It's quite odd. Do I like it? Yeah. Do I feel high? Yes. Anxious? Not really. Calm, relaxed? Yep. Stoned? Yes.
So, quite different. He still has gotten the same amount of THC. This one is actually the 3-to-1 ratio. So, he's not as bothered by things this time around. But obviously, it's the second time he's doing it, so maybe there's a habituation effect here as well. So, the following visit.
It's as strong as number 1, but without the negative bit. So I'm feeling just really relaxed without the care in the world. I'm feeling a little bit tired, very comfortable, and no negative thoughts. You feel like you can hear each drum bit, you can hear the value of the production, and so all the sounds are enhanced. But then suddenly, and this didn't happen before, that sound clicked off a memory, and then I went off into a memory. And I don't think I listened to the song for about 30 seconds then. Yeah. I was just, wherever that went. Yeah. And randomly, the end of that memory loop reminded me of a sound which immediately linked back into a lyric she was singing at that late, and it pulled me back in. It was the weirdest, it was the bizarrest feeling.
This is the chocolate tart sound.
True. Yeah. I put my corner in my mouth, I was just really ready to devour it. And then I can really remember it's like a slow motion, piercing memory of seeing the chocolate. You know, it's just very weird, of seeing the chocolate being eaten by my teeth. But at the moment that I ate it, it was.
Did that like add to it, or like the kind of image of it?
Yeah. Bonkers.
The hospital walk?
Lots of times I came here, I was like, bang, I'm having yogurts, and today it's just, I don't know what I'm going to have. But the minute I saw these, I knew I wanted them. It's just really crazy. I can taste the salt. I can feel the crumble. It's just a really good cookie.
Happy with your choice. You look happy with your choice, so.
I'm not going to eat this stuff at all.
Quite happy. This one, he didn't really get that paranoid or anxious about it. He had a 2-to-1 ratio. So, final visit, obviously that was that would be the 1-to-1 ratio.
Really stoned. Yeah, but I can definitely feel that fidgeting, my hands are cold, my mouth's dry. And then my mind's racing. Not just sleepy, I've got loads of thoughts. I feel cold, I feel sleepy, I've got phantom pains. It's a weirdest sensation. Just feel really, really like not with it. Yeah, I'm just like, whatever, yeah, take the blood, I don't really care. It's pretty weird. Right, let me try and focus. You'll see another series of blue squares appear at different locations on the screen. The task has now changed. Just spent a minute reading that, and I've got no idea what it says.
That's the end.
Right, let me try again. My God. I can't get past the third line. Right, brains on a minute, I literally can't get it. Wow, what a funny feeling. I've got no idea what this means. Just a minute, press yes if the next one. fidgeting.
Yeah.
I'm completely hyper in my thoughts, but I'm really relaxed about it.
So that's what I like to be, not calm.
Well, I'm sitting here like this, and every now and then my left leg goes. Every time I try, I end up calm. So that's why I couldn't answer that. But I'm relaxed about it. So it's just mad feeling. I seem to be finding all the stationery really pleasant. Oh, been pleasant. God.
What was your favourite picture?
I think there was one about the stapler on its side. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Right. So just to warn you before you draw any conclusions, we did 45 more participants, and obviously we don't know that these ratios are going to be the same for everyone. So some people might have their worst day on the 3:1, the best day on the THC only. So we still can't say that yet because we've not done all of those analysis yet. I'll go ahead and So in total, we actually got 80 participants enrolled in the study. 64 came for at least one experiment, and 46 ended up completing all of the 4 experiments. So we did have some people drop out because cannabis was too strong. It lowered their blood pressure and they couldn't really stay awake. So we had to just stop the experiment, take care of them. A couple of hours later, they were all fine. They could go home. But just to show you the numbers, so we actually did 235 experimental sessions. So this is a lot of work, many hours. All in all, this is just the demographics of the participants. Don't spend too much time on this, but cannabis use per year, the bottom one, on average, these people have used 9 times in the last year. So very infrequent users, but they're very healthy, so they've been excluded if they've had any diagnosis of substance use and mental health issues. More quotes, so we see kind of the same kind of type of quotes from people. It is a potent drug. You can change the way that you think and see the world. I do have a bit of data, so this is just the blood levels of THC and CBD in 6 people. So THC at 0 minutes is about the same for all the ratios. There seems to be a slight push towards the 3:1, keeping THC levels a bit higher. But there's still 40 more participants left to analyze. And then CBD levels, we do see that the more CBD there is in the ratio, the more CBD there is overall in your blood. Then we do have a bit of, so this is actually the full data set for heart rate and blood pressure. So after THC, people's blood pressure shoots up, but there's no difference between any of the ratios. So it doesn't matter which ratio you have the same kind of increase in heart rate from that amount of THC. Nothing really significant happens in terms of systolic or diastolic blood pressure. It doesn't really significantly differ between the ratios. And lastly, I did manage to get the music and chocolate data ready for you. So this is 0 is liking it as much as normal. So this shows that cannabis, regardless of the ratio, makes chocolate more enjoyable. There was no difference between any of the ratios, so all of the ratios generally make you enjoy chocolate equally. There's no statistical difference. And the same thing for music, so THC, regardless of CBD, increases music enjoyment, but without any significant difference between the ratios. Sadly, I can't share more results with you yet, but just hopefully in the near future. That's the team, and thanks for listening.